Good evening, friends, and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. So I'm Bhante Sudaso, and I'm here today with Aya Brahmavara, our beloved bhikkhuni from Britain. And we'll be talking a bit this evening about a very central and important topic in Buddhism, the topic of renunciation and simplicity. So we can start by paying homage to the Buddha, and then we'll each make some remarks on the topic, and then we'll take any questions if there's any questions. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So in talking about renunciation and simplicity, actually the first thing that comes to mind to me is that renunciation is actually the heart of Buddhist practice. That the essence of Buddhist practice is in letting go. It's in setting aside our desires. So letting go of our desires, setting aside our aversion, all the things that we love to hate, and also at its core, it's letting go of our self-identity, letting go of our opinions, our ideas, our preferences, our perspectives, and ultimately letting go of this core sense of who we think we are, what we think we are. And the Buddha talks about renunciation as being a form of happiness. So in the suttas, we find the term nekkhamma sukha, which means the pleasure or the happiness of renunciation. And ultimately, the more we practice with renunciation, the more we experience happiness. So we find this in the Four Noble Truths. So the concept that our dukkha, our suffering, is caused by desire, and that when we let go of our desires, then our dukkha also is diminished, also is decreased. So letting go of our wants, our desires, then leads to a natural reduction in our suffering, an increase in our happiness and joy, which is often a little bit the opposite of how we think about things. We tend to think that wanting things and pursuing what we want will lead to happiness. And actually here we are in the United States, which is founded on the idea of the right to the pursuit of happiness, which in theory sounds like a great principle, but in actuality, we tend to go about it the wrong way, which is fueling our desires and chasing the objects of our desires as a way of pursuing happiness. Whereas the Buddha is talking about letting go of desire and letting go of our obsession with objects of desire as instead being the true way to experience happiness. And again, looking at our preferences. So this is something which becomes very noticeable in monastic life. So this morning, some of the monastics here went alms round. And when we do alms round, then we have the opportunity to just eat whatever people give us. So without having much control over specifying what we want or how we want it, instead we just gratefully receive whatever's given. So again, we tend to think that expressing our preferences will make us more happy. You go to the restaurant and you say, well, I want eggs and I want them cooked in this way and not that way, and I want them seasoned with these spices and not those spices, and I want it served with these side dishes and not those side dishes. And We think that's going to bring happiness. But actually, when we can drop all of our preferences, then that means that no matter what we get, it's a gift. No matter what we get, we can appreciate it and enjoy that experience without preference, without wanting things to be a certain way. Because preference is inevitably creating the conditions for disappointment. Preference means that we're expecting things to be a particular way. We're expecting a particular condition. And if things are anything other than our preference, then we suffer. We experience disappointment or depression or irritation or anger because our preferences aren't being met, or expectations aren't being met. So when we let go of our preferences, then we're actually able to experience the happiness of gratitude, the happiness of appreciation, the happiness of appreciating things just as they are without wanting them to be otherwise or expecting them to be otherwise. And of course, renunciation is a central part of monastic practice. So we set aside a lot of the comforts and pleasures and indulgences that ordinary people tend to be interested in. And again, often at first glance, this can seem a bit depressing or disappointing. But once again, it's a source of happiness, because since we're not reliant upon music, or reliant upon movies, or reliant upon sexual activity, or reliant upon particular kinds of food, or particular kinds of clothing, or particular kinds of adornments, or any of that, then that means we can be happy anywhere. We can be happy anytime. We can be happy under any condition, because we don't need anything in particular in order to be happy. And ultimately, this is what renunciation is about. It's about letting go of the conditions we place on our happiness. So when we first approach the concept of renunciation, we might think that it means throwing away the sources of our happiness, throwing away the sources of our pleasure. So when people hear that we don't listen to music, often the reaction is like, oh, how can you throw away music from your life? Music is so pleasant, it's so fun, it's so enjoyable. How can you throw away this source of pleasure? But actually, by renouncing such things, we open ourselves up to the capacity to always have a pleasant state of mind, whether there's music or no music. So we're actually opening up to a much more accessible and refined and potent form of happiness, of pleasure. And again, our self-identity. We have this idea of who we think we are. And again, we tend to think that this is something really important and really valuable. People talk about journey of self-discovery, of figuring out who they are and being authentic to their true self, and holding this up as a pinnacle of how to live a fulfilled human life. But actually, that's a perfect way to live a miserable human life. This constant self-centeredness and fixation on who we think we are. But instead, with Buddhist practice, we're practicing letting go of our self-identities, letting go of attachment to being a particular way, and instead cultivating a flexible mind, a soft mind, an adaptable mind, a mind which can adjust to circumstances without rigidity. And that then makes the mind much more capable of being happy under any set of conditions. So these are just a few remarks to get us started. Maybe Ayurvamavara, if you'd like to say a few words on the topic, and we'll take it from there.
Sadhu. Thank you so much for this teaching. What can I possibly add? One thing I can say from experience, maybe, what is it like to really want something and to be living in such a way that you can't get what you want, and desire will come up. So as monastics, we're not, just because we ordain and we're living in a simple way, and we're receiving offerings and we're not choosing what we receive, we're not immediately free from desire and craving for this and that. And so the actual experience then of renunciation can have different qualities, and sometimes it can be challenging, right? So I really want to do this, or I really want to have that, and it's not possible for me to do so. And how is that? So to be really allowing desire to be present in the mind, in the heart, and not to act on that desire is something maybe not so easy in lay life, because the strength of desire will kind of impel us to move towards what we want and to try exert ourselves to get what we want. So to live a monastic life, or to put ourselves in a retreat situation, which is very similar to living in a monastery, right? To put ourselves in a situation where we have the opportunity to feel that strong energy of desire and not to act on it is, for me, something really precious. And to experience them for ourselves, how is it to sit through wave after wave, maybe, of wanting, desiring? How does it actually feel? What's it like? This sense of yearning, sense of longing, sense of something missing, like I'm not complete without this thing that I'm wanting. A sense of emptiness, maybe, a sense of dissatisfaction with the way things are, like an argument with reality. The way things are is not enough. There has to be something more. I have to get this other thing in order to be happy. To be able to work with this and to feel what it's like to long for, to want, and to desire. And then to notice, isn't it, when we have this opportunity, to notice that these feelings, these mind states, are just like everything else in samsara. They're anicca, anatta, dukkha. They're suffering, unsatisfactory. They're not personal. We don't have to make it my problem. It's more like there is desire, and they are impermanent. So we get the chance then to sit through, to be present for the whole life of desire, from start to finish. So you can feel the energy of wanting, and then you can notice how, if we're steady, if we're patient, if we're willing to just open to that uncomfortable feeling, eventually, slowly but surely, it will dissipate and it passes away. And then we have the chance to experience a taste of freedom from desire. And we're free, not because we've acted on our desire and slaked the thirst momentarily, only for it to arise again. This isn't freedom. The freedom is knowing that I don't have to be a slave to desire. So the mind can free itself in this way. It's like we're not overwhelmed, we're not overcome. We are able to hold steady as the waves of desire and aversion, which is just the other side of the coin, as it were. When these defilements are moving through, we can sit steady and stay mindful. And this ability to ride the waves of desire and aversion is something magnificent. It's noble, and we gain confidence in this practice and start to recognize, yes, as Bhante was saying, renunciation is like opening the doors for us to freedom, to peace, to well-being, to happiness that, as Bhante said, doesn't depend on external conditions. It comes from within. And we all have this potential. And it's really, in a way, only through renunciation that we can begin to appreciate this freedom. freedom from desire. It's not easy. It's not an easy job, but the rewards are beyond words, right? So this taste of freedom. And the Buddha in the Eightfold Path described right intention. What is right intention? Right intention is harmlessness, it's non-cruelty. And the third aspect of right intention is renunciation. So letting go is absolutely fundamental to the path of practice. And our intention, isn't it, is where we set our sights. It's like our guidance, our direction is right intention. So let our direction, let our movement forward on the path be that of renunciation. Be willing, to let go. Be willing to not act on desire, but to observe, to experience, and to stay steady with desire and see how it arises and passes. And we don't have to be slaves to these energies.
Great.
I think that's enough there.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
And just to touch a little bit on the other part of this topic, the aspect of simplicity. What's the opposite of simplicity? Well, the opposite of simplicity is complexity, or complication. And actually, when we look at our lives, how much in our lives that we see that is complex, is complicated. And often we're seeking pleasure or satisfaction in things that are complicated. So intellectual pursuits, so things which require a lot of knowledge and information, and we enjoy how all those bits of information fit together. Or very refined forms of enjoyment. So refined tastes or refined fragrances or refined tactile sensations, or things which are cultural. So in order to appreciate them, one needs to have a lot of cultural refinement and development. So often we find pleasure in things which are complex and complicated. But actually, the state of mind of happiness and peace is an extremely simple state of mind. It's actually extremely uncomplicated. So when we drop all of our desires and preferences and opinions and self-identities and drop all of our intellectualism and all of our complications, then we can let the mind relax into this state of peacefulness and joy, this blissful simplicity of not needing things to be in any particular way, this blissful simplicity of not needing to wrap the mind into a million contorted shapes, but to actually let the mind relax into this state of openness, of appreciative joy, the state of simplicity, of not needing anything to be any particular way. So the simplicity of a mind which needs nothing, which wants nothing, but which is content with the way things are. So the simplicity that we're talking about then, it's the simplicity of the contented mind. So it's not necessarily simplicity in terms of deliberately trying to remove everything complex from one's life, but rather simplicity in the sense of allowing the mind to settle into the state of contentment, the state of appreciation, the state of restful bliss, because complication tends to bring agitation. Complication tends to bring confusion. It tends to bring distraction. So cultivating a simple life, a life that doesn't require too much micromanagement, a life where we can actually do simple things. We can do simple things like sweep the floor, wash the dishes, and go for a walk. And the mind can just be completely present with these simple activities. And and not need to constantly wrap itself up in a lot of complex or complicated matters. So this is another thing that we can work on cultivating, is an appreciation for simplicity. So even just enjoying something simple, like just sitting still and paying attention to your body. There's nothing complicated about that at all. But sometimes if we're addicted to complication, then this can seem so incredibly challenging. Just to appreciate the feeling of your lungs expanding and contracting. Just to appreciate the sense of heaviness and warmth in the body. But that ability to appreciate simplicity brings incredible joy into every moment of our lives. And anything more you'd like to say on these topics, or should we have a look if there's some questions?
Sure.
Okay, that's great. And so at this time we can take any questions. And hello to all the people joining in online. So hello to Rick, Maria, Jayanta, Karuna, Tori, Bhumika, Charlesley, Amaranta, Manal, Putrika, Kim, Damanusari Bhikkhuni. Hello, Venerable. Always lovely to see other monks joining in online. And P. Lee, Dharmika, and Mary. Welcome, all of you. And there's a question here from Dharmika that says, what are all the things Buddha gave up related to body to attain parinibbana? Do you want to say something about this?
I guess, I mean, the immediate thought that comes is the Buddha gave up sort of everything related to body, gave up everything, period. And, you know, we speak about, don't we, the 5 khandhas, the 5 aspects or heaps of our experience, body and feelings and perceptions and mental formations, thought formations and consciousness. One way of seeing or understanding or exploring our experience, the entirety of our experience. And the Buddha really talked, yes, that each of these aspects is not self, is to be seen for what it really is, as dukkha, anicca, anatta. And so, you know, I would say the Buddha's relationship to body would have been, as he encouraged all of us, that of investigating, of experiencing what is body, of considering the suffering that is inherent in body, considering the impersonal nature of body, and considering how this experience of body is constantly changing. Even if we don't feel that intellectually, we can feel it in our meditation, that it's a constantly changing experience. And certainly, even intellectually, we can see how the body is actually, it has its life trajectory. Old age, sickness, and death are inevitable. And so all of these ways of investigating body encourage us, surely, don't they, to let go of any kind of identification with this source of suffering. So I guess, you know, it's difficult to consider the Buddha, but the Buddha's teaching I can receive and I can consider. And the sense I have is that in order to be free from all suffering, to have a mind that's liberated, that's free from greed, hatred, and delusion, one would let go of any kind of holding or tethering or attachment to the experience of body. I hope that answers your question.
Great. Great, thank you. And Rick here says, wonderful topic. This past year I have focused my daily life practice on living a simple life and being content. There's great joy in this practice. Wonderful. I'm glad that you've had that experience. Says, my functioning is impaired due to living with life-altering pain and illness. I have used some sense experiences as ways to cope with intense pain and exhaustion. How do we determine how much we can let go and what we need for health needs? Well, I think when talking about letting go, the most important thing is understanding that letting go is an internal process. And that internal process naturally has an external effect on how we live our life, naturally. But ultimately, it's an internal process. And the most important things to let go are, in fact, desire, aversion, and delusion. So when desires appear in the mind, then we look at those desires and we see them for what they are. We see them as this burning hot mass of pain. And naturally, when we recognize that we're holding on to a ball of burning hot pain, then naturally we want to drop it. We want to let it go. And similarly, when we see aversion arising in the mind, so hostility or hatred or negativity towards any aspect of our experience, whether it's a body sensation or whether it's the behavior of other people or whether it's where we're living or whatever it is, then we, once again, we recognize that aversion, that hostility in the mind, again, it's just this burning hot ball of suffering. And we don't need to keep holding on to that. We can drop it. We can let it go. So letting go then, and it doesn't mean, for example, if you're taking medicine, practicing renunciation doesn't mean that you stop taking your medicine. Renunciation means recognizing these desires and aversions in the mind and recognizing that we don't need to keep engaging in those mental activities of wanting and hating. We recognize that wanting and hating are activities that we do. They're not inherent qualities of mind. They're not the immutable structure of mind, but rather they are activities which we can stop doing if we want to stop doing them. So when dealing with intense pain, well, what do you need for your health needs? Well, pay attention to your body and mind and see what is good for your health. For example, you might need a nice soft mattress. So you hear about people sleeping on the floor and it might be very inspiring and you might think, I want to do that too. But then you have to be realistic about your body and you recognize, actually, my body just isn't strong enough to sleep on the floor. My body needs a good soft mattress. Well, that's okay. That doesn't mean that you're failing at renunciation. It just means you're being realistic about the needs of your body. Or you might have some dietary condition and you need to eat certain foods in order to be healthy. Well, that's okay. That's just being realistic about the needs of your body. But then if you are honest with yourself and you realize, actually, no, I don't need super plush mattress, I can get by with a nice thin sleeping mat, well, then do it. Or if you don't have any particular dietary needs and you can just live on eating whatever, well, then do it. So it's ultimately about being realistic. Realistic about what is necessary for our health and what is just an expression of our preferences, of our desire and aversion. Those are my thoughts anyway. Is there anything you want to add on this? Great. And Amaranta says, arrogance is the opposite of simplicity for me. What do you consider are the remedies to eliminate arrogance? I practice this is not me, this is not mine, and dedicate my merits to others. Is it right? What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds really good. It's wonderful to recognize arrogance. It's wonderful to be aware of our tendency to be proud or conceited or to, put ourselves above others in one way or another. And because these things can be difficult sometimes to recognize, and we can be unconsciously holding attitudes that are imbued with pride and conceit. And so wonderful to own the fact that there is arrogance, that there is pride, that there is conceit in the mind, and to wish to work with that. And absolutely to, we can all benefit, can't we, from again and again bringing to mind not self, not me, not mine, whatever mind states, whatever attitudes, whatever concepts we hold to, not me, not mine, not myself. So in this way we can puncture again and again the balloon of conceit or any other mind states, any other identifications. What is arrogance? What is pride? It's identifying with some aspect or other of the five khandhas and making it mine. So, that seems to me a very good doorway. And also to be grateful, perhaps, if there are any benefits that we have in our life, if we have any kind of privilege, any kind of skills or intelligence or talents that are praised by others or held up to be something great, let's be grateful for that. Have an attitude of humble gratitude. What a blessing to have these qualities. And just as you're suggesting, we can consider how can I use whatever benefits I have, whatever privileges I have, to make merit, to share with others, to spread it around, so that I'm not holding this as me and mine, but actually there's something bright here, there's something positive here. Let's see how I can share it out. That seems to me a really good approach. So sadhu to you, and big, bows to the openness and the willingness to acknowledge these qualities of arrogance or pride. It's not easy to admit to, but actually once we are willing to see these unfortunate qualities, then we get to let go of them and we get to find skillful ways to work with them.
Okay, thank you. And I would just add to that something that I learned many, many years ago from Ajahn Brahmali. I was asking him about exactly this question, how to deal with arrogance. And he gave a very practical piece of advice. He said, whenever there's some quality which you're feeling arrogant about, remember that there are others in the world who are better than you in that quality. It's like, so you think you're a good scholar? Well, there's better scholars. You think you're a good meditator? There's better meditators. Whatever you think you're good at, somebody in the world is better than you at that. It also goes the other way, by the way. If you think you're exceptionally bad at something, well, there's probably people in the world who are worse than you at that as well. So when we reflect in this way, we start to realize that we're actually not particularly special. We have some things that we're good at and some things that we're not so good at, but we're really not that exceptional. We're actually pretty average in the grand scheme of things. So we appreciate our good traits and we protect them. We acknowledge our bad traits and we try to reduce them. But we recognize also that these traits are just temporary conditions. And they've come about because of other conditions, which are also subject to change. And that ultimately these don't define who we are. So, for example, if your parents made you read a bunch of books about Roman history when you were growing up, well, then you might now be an expert on Roman history. It's like, well, okay, that's nice, I suppose. But it's just the product of a particular condition that your parents made you read those books as a kid. And if they'd made you read different books, or maybe you just watch TV constantly, then you wouldn't have that condition in your life. So it's not who you are, it's just the result of a particular condition. And if somebody else didn't have that condition, if they didn't have parents who made them read those sorts of history books, then they wouldn't have that body of knowledge. So you're better than them in having more knowledge of a particular aspect of history, but that doesn't make you better than them. It doesn't make you a better person or a worse person. It just means that you had different conditions than they did. So when we reflect in terms of conditions as being impersonal components of our experience, then there's actually no room for arrogance, because we see I am not these conditions, but rather my experience is built up out of these conditions. These conditions are the building blocks of my experience, but they're not who I am, and they're also not permanent. They're temporary conditions like everything else. And Charles Lee says, does simplicity leave room for Dhamma discussion and debate? How does one have simple Dhamma discussion and debate? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a very good point. And what immediately comes to mind for me, Chelsea, is we have to have a balance, don't we? It's like wonderful to speak on Dharma, wonderful to particularly, explore the teachings of the Buddha, and to really, ask questions and get to full understanding as much as we possibly can. But at the end of the day, we want to put these teachings into practice, and so to meditate, to experience for ourselves the truth of the Buddha's teachings, the Dharma here and now. And so this kind of balance between discussion and wonderful, debate and intellectual exploration of the Dharma teachings, or exploration on the mental level, and then to put those teachings into practice is to kind of deepen the understanding of Dharma. And so each of us, I guess, needs to figure the balance between practice and study. We could put it that way, and to find what balance works for you. And I think both have great importance. I started off myself, I was meditating for years without really doing any study of Dharma. And I feel in many ways that was a great benefit, because the meditation was teaching me so much that is not on the level of speech and thought. But then, for guidance and for fleshing out the Dharma teachings, to actually then start to look at the Buddha's teachings was really important for me, to study the suttas. And we can keep it simple. We can keep referring back to our own experience and let the simplicity manifest in that way.
Great, wonderful. And Mano says, recently I have realized I deeply held on to wrong view, which has stirred up a sense of guilt and complication. How does one embrace simplicity while working through this kind of guilt and knowing now it was a delusion? Well, first off, I recommend that you congratulate yourself for recognizing that you had a wrong view. That is wisdom. The world is full of people who have wrong views and don't know it. In fact, every one of us who is not yet fully enlightened has wrong views which we aren't seeing clearly, otherwise we would be fully enlightened. So congratulate yourself for having recognized you had a wrong view. That's wonderful. That's actually a really praiseworthy trait, that you could see your own wrong view. And the fact that you want to let go of that wrong view and move on, well, that's really, really wonderful. And in fact, this is Buddhist practice. One way of talking about Buddhist practice is that Buddhist practice is constantly letting go of wrong views and cultivating right view. So it sounds to me like you're doing Buddhism, which means you have nothing to feel guilty about. So if we start thinking about our past and how much more messed up we were in the past and feeling guilty about it, well, then there's no end to that. We'll just feel guilty for eternity, and that's not going to do us any good. Instead, I think much better is to appreciate the fact that we're getting better, appreciate the fact that we're moving towards awakening. So rather than feeling guilty about our past mistakes, instead we feel a sense of wholesome pride in the advancement of our practice, the advancement of our wisdom, the development of our understanding. And pride, not in a self-centered way, but rather pride in the sense of appreciating the fact that we're in the footsteps of the Buddha, appreciating that we're progressing towards the most worthy goal imaginable, which is the perfection of wisdom and compassion, which we call awakening, which we call enlightenment. So in this way, then, hopefully you can replace your sense of guilt and instead cultivate in its place a sense of appreciation for your own goodness, appreciation for your progress in the path, for your advancement in moving towards awakening. And Mano continues, the wrong view caused breaking of an important precept that is part of the guilt. Yeah, and this again is something when we think about our memories, when we think about what we've done in the past, then often we'll quite easily recognize that in the past we've made terrible mistakes. If I wanted to start listing all the precepts I've broken in the course of my life, then we'll be here for hours. And that doesn't do us any good because I'm not that person anymore. Doesn't mean I'm perfect now, but rather it means that I can remember having made mistakes in the past, and I've recognized those as mistakes, and I'm trying to not make those kinds of mistakes again. So right now, I'm a person who's committed to not doing those bad things. So it doesn't matter that I did those bad things in the past, because right now I'm not that person. Right now I'm the person who's committed to not doing those things. So then once again, the guilt is not necessary. The guilt is not relevant because we are not the person who did those bad things. We are the people who are committed to not doing bad things. And that's something to have this wholesome pride of, this appreciation for our own commitment to goodness. Okay, anything you want to? Okay. And Rick says, as I've gotten older and my illness has gotten worse, I felt the joy of letting go and giving away many possessions that I no longer need. Wonderful. Great. Yeah, letting go can also be expressed through generosity. So in giving things to others, and cultivating joy in giving things to others. And Rick continues, I felt stuck in whether or not to let go of my pottery equipment and certain outdoor clothes and gear. I don't know whether I might want them in the future if my health improves. Any reflections on how to see clearly? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's sometimes difficult, isn't it, to project into the future and to have a sense of how it's going to be, and especially if there's health issues, one would hope, that the health will improve and that you'll be able to do this, that, and the other. And I don't know, my own experience of giving away possessions, when I was in lay life, I sort of slowly relinquished this, that, and the other until in the end there was nothing left. And my experience of that was there was a sense with some things, yes, it's time to let go. Wonderful, let it go. Share it, give it to someone else, put it into a charity shop. And then with other things, there was a sense of, actually, if I relinquish this now, it's uncomfortable. I may regret this. Okay, I'll just leave it aside for now. Just let it sit there and consider it again a bit later and see then how it feels. It's very interesting. I mean, I had a whole bunch of diaries and I threw them all away. I threw them all into a dustbin at one point. I just thought, enough of all this selfing, let's just get rid of them all. And so I dumped them and they were taken away with the garbage. Later, I regretted that because it felt like a little bit of a sort of trauma. Like I'd kind of pushed myself a bit too far and I'd let go of something that was actually a little bit more precious to me than I'd realized in that moment. And so I think this process of giving away, of letting go, it's something to really encourage in ourselves and to really develop the willingness to relinquish, but also just to be aware of the heart and how it is and how it feels, and not to be too ruthless, to be gentle, and let the process be a gentle process, always with that understanding that possessions are ultimately a source of suffering for us, and we want to be, even when we have them around us, even if we have useful things around us that we are going to keep with us because there's a certain need for them, even then, it's like the Ajahn Chah teaching that cup is already broken. Even then, recognize they're not me, they're not mine. I can't hold on to these things. I can't rely on these things. So we can cultivate an attitude of letting go, even when we're surrounded by stuff. And when it comes to letting go of stuff, just to be mindful, be aware of how it is for us. Are we ready? And not to be hard on ourselves if we don't quite feel ready to let go of this or that at this point. I hope that's helpful.
Great, thank you. And Wagons says, for someone who would like to be ordained as a monk in the future, is slowly letting go of your worldly possessions the way to go? Which I think you addressed that quite thoroughly just now.
Could be, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Try it, yeah.
Yep. And looks like that's the last question. So maybe we'll go ahead and conclude the session here. So thank you all for participating, and thank you, Aya, for this beautiful conversation. It's been really delightful.
Thank you, Bhante. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
And we can conclude at this time with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you all next time.